Hey, this is Simon from Prop Bazaar. Today I will be going through how to create a model like this. This is a prop that's available on our gumroadstore, and yeah, make sure to check it out. So before we actually start working on our test sphere, I will be looking at the original model that will be sold, or that is being sold on the gumroadstore and that you will receive. The hair is one sort of solid mesh. That's the first unusual thing about this model. Usually hair is modeled with strands. However, with this specific style and specific hair, it didn't really work for me. I didn't like the look, so I completely redid the hair and sort of sculpted it based on a few specific manga panels. Keep in mind before you buy it that you will receive this high poly model, but you will also receive a low poly model because this is quite a few polys. It's at 75k tries and 75k faces, which is quite a lot. But don't worry, you also get a low poly version. Yeah, so this might look a bit intimidating to make because we have hair strands that sort of flex and bend into all 3D directions in all three dimensions, sort of. And it's definitely not easy. It takes a lot of polishing, lots of reshaping, but the tools that I used are pretty basic. So let's go to our test sphere and go into the sculpting mode, and let's turn on dynamic topology. Let's turn it to, yeah, around 7, that's fine. So what dynamic topology does, if you don't know, is it adds more polys where they are needed. So it's a dynamic topology. It doesn't subdivide the whole mesh, but it only subdivides sort of certain areas. And this is what I used for this hair. Otherwise this wouldn't be possible because we are going to use the snake hook tool. So the snake hook tool allows you to pull out from your geometry, but it also, with the dynamic topology, it creates more mesh where it is needed. So as you can see, we can make a super long and basically infinitely long strand that comes out. But the cool thing about the snake hook tool is that it allows you to smoothly rotate your mesh. Like you can pull out a strand and you can like sort of easily curve it. Like it assists you at making a smooth curvature, which is super nice and which was basically the perfect tool for Gear 5 hair, for the Gear 5 hair. So I modeled the front hair from a very specific manga panel, and I used a lot of my own imagination. Well, imagination I just did a lot of by hand without any reference. In the back here, I kind of wanted the this shape like going up a bit, like a bit of kind of Super Saiyan style. And then I wanted them to curve up like this. So we have this very relaxed front, but the back is sort of like more dynamic. It has a lot more energy because we have a lot more curls here. But yeah, the front is a lot simpler and the back has a lot more action to it. Sort of this upwards flow, which I really like. And yeah, that's basically it for the modeling part. I'll be showing you how to easily retopologize a mesh like this, not using Blender, but a different free software. So here we are in the software called Instant Meshes. It's a free 3D remeshing software, which is very useful for cases like this, because this is not the type of model that you want to manually remesh unless you want to spend days on it. And so an important thing to note before you actually get into the remeshing, I did create the hair, but you need to make sure that the hair is like one solid object and doesn't have any holes in it, because otherwise remeshing softwares might struggle with that. So yeah, make sure to just close it up, and once you remeshed it, you can just like cut out the parts that you don't need, and then you can texture it. I didn't spend too much time on this. I just wanted it to be like straightforward and simple remeshing. So here, so I just press solve, and it sort of gives you the like a flow map for your topology. And to be honest, while I did go around and like comb a bit, like you can just help it sort of understand the flow of your mesh. It doesn't really make sense for this model because it's not supposed to be rigged, or at least I didn't rig the model. And even if you want to rig it, you don't need perfect flow. Like if you just want the hair to like sort of dangle a bit and have some dynamic bones, some Unity dynamic bones in them, you don't need a perfect topology. It really doesn't matter. You can go here like and define the whole flow, but it's really not worth your time. The way I did it, I just pressed solve, and I did it like for the big ones. I sort of tried to draw the topology flow, but it's really not necessary. And maybe like these strands, if you're gonna do something like that, it makes maybe more sense to give these ones a better topology flow, because you might want these ones to bend if like the character moves in Unity or something. So it makes sense that the topology is correctly set up for a rig. But yep, I didn't do much more than that. I pressed the next solve button, and here it gives you sort of the topology grid. It's not the exact grid, but it sort of gives a texture on how this will sort of look like. Obviously you're not gonna have like these weird artifacts here, but yeah, that's the way it looks. And then we're gonna press export mesh, and so you don't really need a pure quad mesh for this hair, so you don't need to check it. And I think I didn't check smoothing iterations. It's sort of like you just have to like give it a few tries. So like press extract mesh, and obviously you can see this is like too low poly. So yeah, and you can do some smoothing here, and then you can go back and sort of increase the poly count, sort of solve it again, do that again, and then extract again, and you do it so many times until it's like good. And then you can do some smoothing maybe if you have some polys that need smoothing. And so we can see that 30k is already decent enough. Like 32k might be just right. So let's press solve, export mesh, extract mesh, and we are good. So that's already good enough, and you can sort of go here and save your model. So the next step would be to UV unwrap the model. This took quite a bit of time. You can't, with a model like this, you can't go around like and just use the smart UV project, because all the smart UV project does, it creates seams based on an angle, on the angle of a polygon. So if I say I'm gonna smart UV project and make a 66 degree angle, then it's most likely gonna make a cut right here probably. And I don't want that. It ends up giving you like cuts all over the model, and it's impossible to like texture it decently with like gradients, because I knew I was going to have a lot of gradients. So it made a lot of sense to try to UV map it as nicely as possible without spending too much time on it. Like UV unwrapping this was definitely not that easy, and lots of seams might seem a bit arbitrary and might not have like the best routing, but it does the job. Like you don't have to spend unnecessary time on stuff like this. Alright, here we are in Substance Painter. This is the tool I used for texturing. Here you can see the UV map again. You can see a few seams, and you can see that they aren't like entirely the same size everywhere, but it's good enough. It definitely works. So I'll quickly show you how to do this super easy texture, since it's just white hair with sort of purplish shadows. So yeah, I started off by creating a white base color, and then I went to the texture set settings and I baked mesh maps. I baked just all of them so I could be flexible with the texturing. I went to bake mesh maps, and I used low poly mesh as high poly mesh because I didn't really want to bake details from a high poly mesh. It wasn't necessary. And I set the anti-aliasing to 8x8, and that was about it. And then I baked the selected textures. Just need to press here. And something that's nice is something that I wanted was the ambient occlusion texture. So yeah, if we go to the first sort of shadowing color, you can see I have a few effects on here. I started off with a fill, and the fill has the ambient occlusion loaded in, which was perfect like for the job, because obviously the ambient occlusion created all these shadows right in between these strands, just where I needed my shadows, obviously, because that's just how it works. And if I turn off the effects, first of all, we can see the ambient occlusion was inverted, so I just added a simple invert filter. And then I added a levels effect to sort of take the ambient occlusion and push it so that we have these more sharper edges which look more hand-drawn. It looks more like an anime cell shading style. And then I did add a simple blur. I think it's not set up very high. It's just a very subtle blur. Something you can't even really make it out, but it's just a super subtle blur. Just to blend it more with our next sort of shadow, which basically uses the same technique. We have a fill with our ambient occlusion, we have an invert, and we have the levels. It's just that the levels are positioned a bit differently, so that the purple is more in the center of the ambient occlusion, so to say, and not like the outer part. So sort of we have this gray to purplish gradient. And here the purple is also stronger. And you can see that you can definitely use ambient occlusion to, in this case, maybe it's not 100% ideal, but you could theoretically use this to create like super hard shadows and make sort of a cell shading style. But in this case, I wanted to emulate the colored manga panels, which were actually drawn pretty like smoothly. And yeah, that's basically it. Like that's it. And the same applies here. You obviously get the ambient occlusion automatically right here, just where you need it, and you can nicely tweak it with the levels. And this was done in a matter of minutes, which is super basic, but it looks great. And yeah, here's the final product again. Here we have it with our colors. I also set it up in Blender. When you buy the prop, you get a setup Blender file and also a Unity with a Poyomi shader. In my opinion, it looks even better in Unity. But yeah, basically in Blender I just have like the curves set up a bit differently, so the colors pop a bit more. And I also set up a simple outline shader. And basically the same thing applies for Unity. I have an outline shader, it just renders a bit nicer in Unity because the outline options in Unity with the Poyomi shader are just better in my opinion. But yeah, that's about it. I hope this video was helpful and might give you a better idea on how to create stuff like this. And yeah, make sure to check out the Gumroad store, and I'll see you in the next video.